God says, hey, time out. Let's not do that. Men be understanding and women be careful. And you just might be able to find a harmony. And that's the idea today, is you got to find a harmony between the two of you that lasts decades.
Well, everyone, welcome again to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. If you haven't heard a previous recording that we've had with Matt Lair, then I'd reference you to that. It's excellent. Just a general introduction to the ministry work he does and the services he offers to counsellors, as well as those requiring counselling around all aspects of marriage. And it's a real privilege to talk today, Matt, to you about 4 different issues around marriage. And we'll deal with them in 4 different YouTube sessions. We'll publish them separately. And those 4 sessions are intimacy in marriage around communication, intimacy in marriage around emotions, intimacy around spirituality, and then physical intimacy and how all those others affect that. And really, you started the conversation when we were speaking about this. Firstly, these are the things that you've discovered are real pinch points within marriage. So tell us why these 4 topics, ones that especially you'd like to talk about.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. So after training 80,000 mentors in 15 countries and dedicating 20 years to broken marriages, I find patterns. Patterns tend to really jump up. And one pattern is just a broken communication between a husband and a wife. But then I came across this pattern where there is a lack of intimacy in these 4 areas that is destroying marriages. And I'll hone in a little bit on men today. And even though this goes both ways, I want to hone in a little bit more on men. But this idea to create verbal intimacy with your wife and emotional intimacy and spiritual intimacy, which often produces the 4th, which is physical intimacy. Physical intimacy is often a result, it's an outcome, if you will, to the formula of the other 3. And I find men struggle with communicating with women or their wives. They struggle with emotional, all the ins and outs of emotional connection, and they struggle with spiritual intimacy. So men tend to struggle with these 3, but they want the 4th, they want the physical and the sexual, but they are clueless with the other 3. And a lot of women would say, I would rather have the first 3 than the 4th one. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And you're right there, because the interesting thing, the buy-in for men is, look, if you really want to enjoy or have a relationship where you're enjoying the 4th one, you need to invest in the first 3.
Yes.
And it really is, it's almost like clockwork. Those of us who have discovered it really is an investment and the returns will follow.
It is. And I personally struggled with all 3. And I had to learn and work hard, and it takes effort to work on that as a man and with my wife. And what works for me, you may have to tweak it to make it fit your marriage and your dynamic. So that's okay. But we're going to dive into these 4 and help people understand, well, what are they? And then how do I implement them?
So communication then, tell us, what in your experience is the fundamental problem with communication between men and women?
Well, the first fundamental problem is women on average use 25,000 words a day. Men on average use 7,000. And by the time the man walks in the door after a long day of work, he's done. He's spent his 7,000 words, doesn't have any left. And his wife just got ramped up. She just got started and she wants to verbally communicate. He wants none of that. And so you immediately have tension. And so there's sort of a dynamic there. And then she feels abandoned and left alone. And so he utters the fewest amount of words possible to maintain his marriage. And so this is a problem. This really does hurt, and it breaks down a marriage fairly quickly.
We're, of course, 2 blokes doing this, but we've both, between us, I've been married 30 years. I don't know how long you've been married, Matt, but between us, we've racked up, I would say, enough experience to hopefully have learned some of these things the hard way.
Oh, absolutely. So, the Bible talks a lot about communication. There's 2 scriptures that I just like to use as my life, sort of like a lighthouse in the dark night. One is 1 Peter 3:7 tells husbands to be understanding of their wife. And so no matter what we do, we've got to commit ourselves to being considerate and understanding. that our wives are made quite differently than we are. And let's just wake up every day saying, you know what, I'm going to do a better job today of being understanding and communicate with my wife because I'm biblically obligated to do that. And then if you read a little further in Peter, you'll find that it says, wives, you can win your husbands over with a gentle spirit. And so similarly, a wife has to be careful that she doesn't use contempt and anger and malice and yelling or nagging, because what often happens is when you use contempt in communication, it produces contempt. So if I'm going to use contempt and anger, it produces contempt and anger. And so that's why God says, hey, time out. Let's not do that. Men, be understanding, and women, be careful. And you just might be able to find a harmony. And that's the idea today, is you got to find a harmony between the two of you that lasts decades. And I've been married nearly 25 years. So between the two of us, we're over 50 years. And it's work. I think that's the first thing I'll say, is it is work. And those who fail to do the work, they're going to be in trouble.
I mean, that's a great point, right? So the reason why marriages last on average so much longer than cohabiting relationships is because you've made that promise to stick the course before your peers, before your friends. And I think that means something. So for my wife and I, we've kind of, we agreed to the fact that we bought into this being for life. There's no way out. So when we discover that things aren't working, and, at the beginning it's all lovely, but then you discover, well, actually I married a monster. And your partner says, well, I married a monster too. Well, we're going to have to find a way of working through this because there's no alternative. And then you get to where I have to say, and I don't know, and I do believe my wife would feel the same way, Matt. After 30 years, our marriage is better than it's ever been. And it's wonderful. It's an enabler. It's everything you would hope marriage would be. But that's taken some getting to, like you say. And it's that, well, we're in this for the long run and there's no option, which is the thing that gets you there and stops you walking out the door, as soon as.
I love hearing that from you, Tony. That's a beautiful statement and a real tribute to you and your wife and the work you put in. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors that's world renowned, he says that in the second half of your marriage, you find a deeper, quieter love that far exceeds anything you've ever experienced in the early beginnings, including infatuation and sex and all of that. There's a deeper, quieter love to be found in the second half of your marriage when you get a little bit older, a little bit gray, a little bit wrinkled, and you take your wife by the hand and you look back at all that you've overcome. And there's a deep, quiet love there that is so precious. And here's the idea. Just get there. Folks, just get there. Like, get to that second half. Just get through all the turbulence and the whitewater and all the hurt. Just get past all that with God's help. Because like you said, Tony, there's a deeper, quieter love to be found that is so beautiful.
Yeah, and communication is key to that, right? And it just takes so long to learn the simple lessons. Oh, my goodness. So if we can give anybody any shortcuts today, and men especially, let's try and do that. But now, you mentioned some verses in Scripture. I don't want to remind people, most of our supporters are Christians, but we have supporters from all faiths and none. And it's this thing about the value of man-woman marriage that ties us all together. But there are a lot of really useful biblical analogies. And another one is, around, if you recall, Israel's wandering for 40 years in the wilderness. And they were wandering around, and they got to the promised land eventually after 40 years. But the journey itself, the direct route, apparently could have taken 11 days. But such was the nature of their obstinance and the stories of the Old Testament, everything else that's happened, that it actually took 40 years for whatever reasons, various complex reasons, instead of those 11 days. And the same is in marriage. And the route to finding that deeper experience together, one of the routes is this communication issue. So I'm really glad you put this down as a first thing. So, I don't know, give us some hints and tips. Tell us where to go.
Well, again, if you were to really look at sexual satisfaction in a marriage, a lot of it comes from what's in between the ears. if there is a intellectual stimulation and respect and admiration between husband and wife, that carries itself into the bedroom. And if you can just imagine for a second taking 10 or 15 minutes out of your day every day, sit down with your wife with a cup of coffee, your favorite beverage, sit out on the back porch or on the back deck or whatever, and you have 15 minutes with no cell phone, no TV, no electronics, and you just talk, that is going to create this intimacy intellectually, verbally, and that is going to spill over into every aspect of your marriage. So I've got about 3 or 4 ideas here. Number one, men, pay attention to this one. Ask your wife her opinion often and just listen to her answer. Don't judge it, don't fix it, don't change it. Ask for her opinion and just listen. And this really goes a long way for a woman feeling validated. I don't know about you, Tony, but sometimes I try to fix my wife, or I try to, I like to get my hands on everything, and that usually doesn't go well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Matt. And in fact, there's a kind of a meme video, I don't know if you've seen it, called The Nail on YouTube, which kind of deals with this. If you haven't seen it, just type in The Nail in the YouTube search box and it'll be the top item. And it it essentially depicts this thing, that the tendency between men to fix things. And often a woman doesn't want you to fix it, she just wants to talk to you about it. She wants to, her idea of love is being able to express how she feels about something to you. And your tendency, of course, because you're a fixer, you do things, is to go ahead and try and fix it. And I won't ruin the YouTube video, but it's well worth it's a very humorous look at exactly that sort of situation. But I learned that, and now, in fact, even this past weekend, my wife was talking to me about something, and she was going into a lot of detail, and I said, do you want any advice from me on this, or do you just want me to listen to you on this? And she said, I'd rather you just listen.
Good for her.
No, exactly, because the sorts of things lended themselves to, actually, there are some good solutions to this. And we both knew that, but she didn't want to. The situation was that she couldn't implement the solutions or whatever, and she just wanted to talk about the frustration, and that's great. And learning that, learning to kind of know the difference. And
what a brilliant question, though, Tony. It's a brilliant question. Would you like me to share my opinion, or do you just want me to listen? That is a brilliant question everyone should just write that down. That's what I need to ask my wife often. And I'll tell you, many times she'll say, just listen.
And it gets me out of a lot of trouble, Matt. Let's put it that way.
You learned it somewhere. You either learned by failing or you learned by reading a book. But it's a good one to ask. And the other technique, which again is not a manipulation technique, it's a genuine thing, is to, when you get an opportunity, if your wife is sharing something with you, is to reflect it back and make sure that you've understood something. So you're saying that you feel this way because of that. And then, that's exactly what I'm saying. Or they'll correct you and say, well, kind of, but no, you got that bit wrong. And again, this is all, men and women, it turns out, are different. Now, you may have seen in the news recently, our High Court, our Supreme Court have adjudicated on the fact that, yes, it turns out men and women are different. Something we've all known for, since before our country existed. But anyway, and this is one of the areas in which there's a general difference, apart from the whole biology thing, is this conversational aspect. Very, very different. And if you want to love your wife, so if it's a biblical analogy, if you want to love your wife as Christ loved the church, well, you need to help her to be the best she can be and to sacrifice some of your own desire to jump in and speak and solve and either sit in silence or say your piece when it's not appropriate. That's part of the sacrifice you make. Offer yourself as a living sacrifice. And there's nowhere more important than that, as that than within a marriage, and no more important aspect than how you communicate. I also think there's a key element, and I encourage every listener to pursue this with a vengeance, and that is pursue the skill of negotiating. Pursue it. Learn how to do it well. Learn how to be negotiable. Learn how to compromise well. Because when you're communicating, especially when it comes to preferences and in your marriage and family and household and money and all those things that clash, get really good at negotiating and compromising, because that tells your wife and your husband that you love them. Who wants to live with someone who's non-negotiable or
Correct.
rarely negotiable? And this comes out in communication, in the way that we act, on our body language. That's a whole nother thing to be thinking about. They say that 85% of your communication is nonverbal. It's what your eyebrows do when you're mad. It's what your face and your scowl and the shaking of the head or your body language. And I've really had to work hard on that, Tony. My body language was terrible in the early parts of my marriage. My wife knew I disagreed without me saying a word. And it often hurt her. It often shut down communication because I was so expressive with my body language. And I've had to mature through that. I don't know. Have you struggled with the same?
Oh, but I suppose my big thing was arguing over things I didn't need to argue over. So there's two things here, right? And I'll be very honest. So often things like paint color, for example. Yep. So, I would have a preference for whatever reason, and I would be moody if I didn't get my preference, and I would want my preference, and blah, 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 blah. And now I've just decided that for certain things, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And I will genuinely say I'm happy with whatever you want, because it just doesn't matter. And if there's something I'm vehemently against, well, I'll express. And my wife will be gracious enough to say, well, if you really dislike it that much, that's fine. But I rarely do that, because with so many things, it just doesn't matter. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yeah, the older I get, the less that those things matter. And you just took my third point here, which is wonderful. I say it this way: if you're listening and you really want to fix communication issues, disagree sparingly. Like, make your disagreements more and more rare and not as often, and be more thoughtful about how you disagree. So I've got two things. Ask yourself these two questions. If you're going to disagree, is this the right time? And is this the right place to disagree? So first of all, should I disagree at all? I'm going to argue 50 to 60% of the time, the answer is no.
Yeah.
Disagreeing with my wife on this particular matter is foolish, because it's such a non-consequential issue. It's such a minor issue. Why am I verbalizing my disagreement when it doesn't really matter? But if you should disagree, which sometimes we should, then ask myself this question: is now the right time? And is this the right place?
Yeah, very
and
much.
The third one: can I be kind? Is my temper, am I a little bit elevated? Because if I'm a little bit elevated and angry, this is not a good time. And so is this the right place? Is this the right time? And am I in a good place where I can be kind? And if I just stuck to that principle, it's going to transform the way that we communicate. Because most couples communicate well when they're happy, but they often struggle when they're upset.
Yeah,
and that's where you've really got to be careful, because that's where all the damage is done.
Yep. And that comes across in different ways, doesn't it? So because I'm a male, I'm quite often, I can be quite loud, and I can be quite sharp and expressive. And I don't mean anything more by it, and a male wouldn't notice, but a female does. And that, that can come across as more aggressive than I mean it to be, simply because of who I am and the way I express things sometimes. And another issue which often comes up is, just because you can win an argument doesn't mean you should. Yep. So I've often, not in recent years, I have to say, but in the past I've been hit with the one, you're just better at arguing than me. And nobody wins that one.
Well, Tony, not only is this a good
lose.
principle for marriage, but that's a great principle for life.
Yeah.
As we get older and more mature, we should be arguing less with people, more tolerant of other people's opinions being different than ours.
Yep.
Not that we should ever accept anything that's immoral. Like that's a whole different
Yeah,
conversation.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
if it's just clashing preferences, why do I need to disagree with so many people? Why do I need to be so disagreeable?
And that's a very, again, these are strong biblical principles about as much as you can, follow after peace diligently, those sorts of things that we're kind of obliged to do, but standing up when it's important to stand up. And I think that's kind of one of the other problems is sometimes men aren't willing to deal with things that need to be dealt with because they're almost scared of their wives being cross with them or scared of, fracturing the relationship. And none of us want that. And all of us know what it's like when there's kind of, there's an atmosphere in the room, and you don't want that. It's horrible. You want the unity and you want to be the oneness and the love that's kind of just so overt. And sometimes you can and none of us want that. But there are times when it's the man's role to gently but definitely make a point. And as much as it's the case of not arguing when you shouldn't, there are points when you need to recognize a time to intervene.
Well, not only is that true, but we are in a culture right now that is actually very damaging to men. And the culture now is really pressing in on men, and it's really shaming men, guilting men, it's devaluing men. And I'm all for valuing women at the highest level. I'm all for that. But in the course of that action, we got to be careful that we don't disregard the value of a man in the marriage and in the home and in the family. And the problem that I'm observing is men are becoming more and more passive and less involved and more in the shadows. And this also frustrates wives. Like they don't want their husbands to be less involved. And so to your point, men, I see this more in men, is they go silent. Like talk about a communication problem. They're not too aggressive. They're not too opinionated. They're just silent.
Yep.
And this infuriates wives because she wants a partner. She doesn't want a son or a child. She doesn't want to become his parent. And so you hit the nail on the head, Tony. Men need to rise up, speak up, stand up, look up, like wake up, but be kind. So communicate, but be kind. Listen to this. You'll never fix a problem you don't address, that you don't face head on. And so a man, I'll say this to husbands, you should never complain about your wife if you've never verbalized what it is you need from her.
Yeah, yeah.
And this goes both ways.
Right.
Same thing with women. But the key is to be kind. Like I created a phrase. It's a universal phrase that works all over the world. And it really helps couples change their behavior or get their spouse to wake up in areas they would like them to. Here it is. Honey, or your favorite pet name for your spouse. It would mean a lot to me if you would, and then fill in the blank. Finish the sentence. It would mean a lot to me if you would clean out the garage. Help me with the dishes. It would mean a lot to me if you would go to church with me on Sunday. It would mean a lot to me is a very effective way to communicate. It's not demanding. It's not punitive or hurtful. It's not critical. I'm just saying, hey, honey, it'd mean a lot to me if you would do this, and then just let it sit.
No, that's brilliant. And I think the reason so many men struggle with that is because we don't do... We actually have, women will be amazed to hear this, but we have the same number of emotions that women have. We just don't talk about them because we don't feel we're supposed to and able to, because we're supposed to be strong and we're supposed to be capable and we're supposed to be holding up, our end of the bargain, if you like. And men have, characteristically two settings. We're either angry or we're fine. And actually, there's an awful lot in between, but we just don't talk about it. And so when you say it would mean a lot to me, that kind of starts the thing about I'm revealing that I do have other feelings. But there's nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, you should do. Your wife wants you to do that.
Tony, my wife took it to a whole nother level. My wife will say this, honey, it would mean a lot to me if you would do this. I'll leave it between you and the Lord Jesus. Now I have to do it. She's good. She's like a little Jedi, that girl. She's got me doing stuff all the time now that I never thought I would do a day in my life.
Yeah.
She's got me taking 14 pillows and neatly putting them on top of the bed every morning after I make the bed. 14 pillows. How many pillows do you really need in your home? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I think I think you need some therapy via a separate video on that one.
Will you
That's quite
counsel us,
serious.
Tony?
Yeah, but on that front as well, it's really interesting because the second area of fault, which again I hope I haven't made this mistake recently, but sometimes I have done, is again I will inadvertently criticize my wife in public, which I don't see as criticism. So again, because I communicate sometimes quite robustly, sometimes quite bluntly, sometimes quite thoughtlessly because I'm a man, and sometimes I might say something about something she said in public, and she's hurt by that. And again, of course, I think as you alluded to earlier on, you never criticize each other in public. You never do that. You gently talk to each other in private. You're a team. You're the team. You are one flesh in public. And so that's another mistake I've made as a man, is recognizing sometimes my words, although to me they're fine and to other men they would be fine, to a woman not so much.
I agree, and I think that's a great rule of thumb. Never ever criticize in public in front of any other people at all. Do it in private if it must be done. But I got another thing to say about criticism. Human nature, there's a psychological maneuver here that's happening that's not healthy. When we want a human to change, whether it's a child, a wife, a husband, a friend, we almost always begin the communication with criticism. It's like you're a lawyer and you indicted them and they're now on trial. So I'm going to start the conversation with 3 things you've done wrong, hoping to convince you to do what I think is right. I say don't do that anymore. Don't ever lead in with criticism because it produces criticism or contempt. Lead in with what it is that you want from them. That way it's not punishing. Honey, it would mean a lot to me if you would clean out the garage Saturday.
Yeah.
Now, what Pam could have said is, I've asked you 3 times to clean out the garage and you didn't do it, and I think you're lazy and you procrastinate, and by the time she's done hitting me with the criticisms, my spirit is deflated. And if all she would have said is, it would really mean a lot to me if you could get that done this Saturday, that encourages me and that turns on my want to switch, my want to work with her. So I say, try to keep the criticism out of the equation entirely.
Yep.
And focus on what it is you want from your spouse. You might get a lot more traction, and you they might actually do it quicker than you think with the right attitude.
Brilliant. Yeah, and it's the 2 things that you said of, if you've got that regular time, whether it's 5 minutes a day or 15 minutes once a week, but find that regular time, ideally once a day, where you sit down and you talk and share your day together. Yep. So, and you talk about the things that you need to talk about, which you need to pass information across to each other. And once you're in the habit of talking like that, you can then start sharing these things. It would mean a lot to me if you could, which is not leading with criticism, but it's asking for a change in behavior or something else like that from an emotionally vulnerable perspective. And that's brilliant. The place where my wife and I find real use is traveling in the car together. Because whenever, even at home now, although our 4 kids are grown up and they're supposed to have left home, but they're back and forth so much. But even then, at home, there's always, I'm working or she's working, and it's in the car together. There's nothing else to do apart from talk to each other, and that's marvelous.
It is. We actually created a tool for couples called Discovery Cards. They're date night cards. It's a deck of cards. It's 52 cards in a deck. It's not a game. And on each card, there's 4 questions. And the questions range from funny, serious, your history, high school, grade school, retirement, and it ranges all over to help couples communicate about things that are different and they're things they've never talked about before, or get out of the rut. Most couples talk about 2 things after they're married: They talk about kids, and then they talk about money, bills, or work. And so these two things are what we call a rut. Like, get away from just talking about kids and work and money. How about your dreams, and how about your future, and how about in grade school, and what were your grades, and what was your favorite teacher? And all of a sudden this feeling and sort of like these chemicals are released in the brain, especially for women, that says, man, he's really interested in me. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. And it's funny because I, like yourself, I go around and do an awful lot of marriage retreats and talks on marriage and loads of other things like that all over the place. But some of the exercises we do is like a love map type thing. So you ask each other questions, a range of, needn't be that many questions, 7 or 8 questions.
Right.
All sorts of things that you wouldn't otherwise know about each other, or you wouldn't necessarily know about each other. And you just find out things that you never knew. Oh my goodness, I've been married for so long and I never knew that about you.
And I'll say this to husbands, if they're listening right now, they're like, oh my goodness, this seems overwhelming to me. I don't have enough time to talk. Okay, time out. 5 minutes every couple days.
Yeah.
I'll say this. If you stopped for 10 minutes a week, like pick Thursday night, 10 or 15 minutes, that's it, once a week, your wife would cherish that.
Yeah.
And I think that men often think, well, they want all of this all of the time. No, they don't. No. A little bit goes a long, long ways.
That's
Try
right.
it. Test it.
Try it. Yeah, try it.
Yeah.
Try it and see what the results are,
Yeah.
And actually the investment pays out. And the other thing to make note of is the past does not predict the future, right? If you've messed it up until now, the communication issues that make couples think they can't go on. I've seen couples resolve these things and turn into beautiful blossoming relationships that just flourish and are wonderful for everyone to see. These things, communication things, are the easiest things to be fixed if you just put some effort in.
You're right, they can. God's a big God. I've seen the most horrible, no hope, filed for divorce, separated.
Yeah.
I've seen God redeem marriages that nobody thought could be redeemed. And we actually counsel couples using Zoom anywhere in the world. I'm still counseling a couple from Switzerland using Zoom. Brilliant. It works quite well. And that leads us to the fourth thing and the final thing is when you do your 15-minute connecting with your spouse, here it is, no electronics. Turn everything off.
Good. Yep.
Lay your phone in the kitchen, turn that thing off. My wife hates it when we have dinner or when we're having our connecting time and I'm on my phone.
Yep.
And it's really disrespectful and it's really unloving and selfish for me to do that to her. So for 15 minutes, can you just turn everything off and just have a conversation?
No, I love that very much. I think that's really strong. And when did you and your wife start doing that?
Oh my goodness. So we created a thing in our marriage counseling technique 20 years ago called rounding the bases to address issues, resolve issues, negotiate. And our thing is every year couples need to round the bases and negotiate, renegotiate, readjust. Yep. It's not like set it once and forget it because life changes, things change. So every year, my wife and I, we put our same counseling method as the method that we counsel other couples, but we do it just with each other.
Great.
And people can go through this on my website. It's a course that we created helping couples address issues and solve them. And so we were rounding the bases on our date nights, and Pam said it would mean a lot to me if during meals and on our dates you would not bring your phone.
Great.
No problem.
Simple. Yeah, simple.
But then there's times where I forget, and it kind of slips back in. And then she has to remind me nicely.
And it's like all these things, there are times when we mess it up, but is the direction of the heart pointing in the right way, and that's the main thing. And then you'll respond to that. And so in those conversations, I would say there's another thing which I often talk about is the smelly fish. Because there are some problems that you can never resolve, and there's just no point in always bringing them up. It might be to do with in-laws, it might be to do with something else like that. And frankly, there isn't an answer. It's just really annoying. Stick it in a Tupperware box, Otherwise, everything in the fridge will stink of fish, and you don't want that.
Yeah.
You know. So recognize there are times when we open the smelly fish box, but mostly it's shut.
Yeah,
And
I like that. I've never heard
whatever
that
your
before.
issue is, stick it in a box. You know.
Yeah, I like that. And so, you know, if you apply these things, carve out 10 or 15 minutes a week, start there, something that's simple, no electronics, you just might find an intimacy that will spill over into every other aspect of your marriage. And most wives don't want to just jump in the bedroom and have sex upon any particular whim. They want romanced. And the number one way to romance a woman is through communication. It's verbal and it's intellectual. And we can't forget that as men.
That's absolutely right. And sex, physical comes at the beginning for men. It comes at the end of a longer
Right.
conversation for women.
Right.
Absolutely right. Should we leave communication there?
Yes, sir.
Matt Loehr, what a wonderful privilege to talk to you. If you're tuning into this for the first time, there are another 3 of these. I'd encourage you to go and look for them. We'll try and link to them in this video. Matt is the president of Dare to Be Different Marriage Ministries. We'll put the websites up so you can go and follow him and maybe book some sessions with him if you want to. We're going to look at 3 other sessions, but for now, Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you.